Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. What House Bill 90 would do would significantly increase the penalties for distribution or manufacture of fentanyl or carfentanil over 28 grams. It would do a mandatory life imprisonment sentence if you're caught distributing or manufacturing that amount of fentanyl. Fentanyl is the leading killer if you're 18 to 45 right now. It's become such a problem across this state and across this country that I think we need to send a very strong and clear message that if you're distributing these types of drugs, you intend to kill people, and you're going to face the requisite penalty for that. My intent with this was to model what we used to have with heroin. It used to be if you distributed heroin in this state, it was life imprisonment, and we didn't have a heroin problem. And my hope is that this sends a chilling effect throughout the drug culture and drug dealer community and manufacturing community, that there's going to be a zero tolerance policy if you're caught with more than 28 grams. That's what it does, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
The issue or the question or concern that I have is the way that fentanyl hides in many substances. Because from what I've learned, and I've tried to educate myself as much as I can about fentanyl and the problem, and because it is a problem, I 100% agree with you that it's a deadly drug. But my concern is with regards to how it's concealed. Do you have anyone that's going to come and explain or could explain all the different ways or the different products and things that fentanyl have in them and how it's?
So it's what I've tried to educate myself as well, and what I have learned is that it's in everything. And if you buy an illicit drug these days, there's a good chance fentanyl is present in some of it, because fentanyl is extremely cheap and much cheaper than the drug that is being purported to be. And so you can test the drugs, okay? Once they're seized, obviously you can test them and you can see what's in them. And this, again, looking at the 28 grams, I thought that was an appropriate amount. That's not an insignificant amount of fentanyl. That's quite a large amount of fentanyl, and it actually has the ability, with only, I believe, a couple milligrams, have the ability to be able to kill you. This amount, 28 grams of fentanyl, has the ability to kill thousands of people. And so, in my opinion, when you rise to that level in aggregate, so if you catch somebody and when you test all of their drugs, if it's in aggregate more than 28 grams, that's when that severe penalty kicks up. And the hope is that, this stuff is being cut, from what I'm told as well. People are bringing in fentanyl in a concentrated amount, then they're cutting it in all types of other drugs. My hope is that the guy who's bringing it in uncut, this is going to give some great pause before you're willing to handle something like that.
Right.
And the way I envision this being used is primarily for those guys. I think you're going to have a hard time just catching your average drug dealer with 28 grams of fentanyl, okay? This is really targeted at the guys who are bringing this into our state or at a manufacturing facility that's cutting it. And so that my response to your question about that would be that would be my intent, and that's how I see it being used by law enforcement.
And for the committee's benefit, sometimes marijuana has fentanyl. Y'all found traces of marijuana
There's been
in fentanyl.
fentanyl that is found in marijuana. There's been fentanyl that has been found in Mexican Viagra. So
Right.
fentanyl can be present in just about every substance.
And that was the point that I was trying to make, that it's kind of hidden sometimes within substances, that the buyer doesn't even know that what they're getting is something that's deadly.
But we don't presuppose in our business as law enforcement officers, we don't presuppose the innocence of the person who knows that the substance will be present for the majority of the times.
Well, I understand the difference. I'm just trying to let the committee as well know that, because what I've seen, it really is, in a small amount, is very deadly.
Very deadly.
Right. Red cards, they've checked the box that they are present in opposition but do not wish to speak. Sarah Whittington, Justice Accountability Center. Chloe Denman, the first 72. Kayla Gitlin, the first 72. Ashley Hamilton, Louisiana Center for Children's Rights. Chris Kaiser, ACLU of Louisiana. Chico Yancey, vote. Ronald Marshall, vote. Matthew Green, vote. Anisha Shetty, vote. Courtney Holden, Charles Arms, vote.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Terry Landry Jr., I am the Policy Director for the state of Louisiana for the Southern Poverty Law Center Action Fund. I come before you in opposition simply because of this bill's intent to give life without parole to anyone that is in possession or distributes more than 28 grams of fentanyl. And first, let me say, we don't condone, and we don't, we understand that this is a serious problem, so we understand why Chairman Stefanski has brought this legislation. However, we have been fighting for the past 5 years or more with some of our coalition members to end life without parole completely. As you all know, Louisiana jockeys back and forth with Oklahoma every year as the top incarcerated state in the nation. And so this bill only adds to that. And furthermore, it adds to the cost that Louisiana spends daily on individuals that are serving life without parole. Serving life without parole does not make our prison system safer. You take away a person's hope. When a person is sitting incarcerated, especially if they're going in at a young age of 18 to 25, and they're knowing they're never, no matter how they try to change their lives, how much the system has, quote unquote, rehabilitated them, which the intent of the prison system or what it's supposed to be, that person knows that no matter what they do, they'll never be given the opportunity to prove that they've been redeemed or rehabilitated. So we come before you, ask that it's just the penalty. We understand that this is a huge issue in our state.
Good morning. I am Megan Garvey. I'm here on behalf of the Louisiana Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers in opposition to this bill. I certainly share the concern about the life without parole sentence. I do agree that fentanyl is very dangerous. I too have lost people to fentanyl, and so I understand the urge to want to do something about this emergency situation. However, I do believe that the bill as written is not targeting the groups that were listed in the presentation. Distribution is not just drug dealing. Distribution is anyone that shares drugs. So young people that are experimenting with drugs, sharing drugs that may not know that it has fentanyl in it, that's distribution. Addicts who are using drugs that may not know that something has fentanyl in it, that's distribution. Additionally, when we talk about 20 grams of fentanyl, it's true, that's an enormous amount of fentanyl, and sounds really terrifying. However, the way that this law is written is different than the way that some other schedule laws are written, which is that this law does not require that the person be in possession of actually 28 grams of fentanyl. This law says that if you are in possession of anything that weighs 28 grams and some part of it tests positive for fentanyl, that you can go to prison for life. We heard Mr. Renazza testify that there is fentanyl in all kinds of drugs. There is fentanyl in marijuana. And so this law, as written, could send somebody to prison for the rest of their life for possessing marijuana that has been tainted by fentanyl, whether that person intentionally knew that it had fentanyl, whether that person was selling drugs for profit, or whether that person was intentionally trying to share fentanyl or anything dangerous with another person. And for those reasons, I am very against this bill. If there's any questions about the law or case law that interprets the difference between cocaine and how the law has changed, I have information on that.
Yes, good morning. My name is Stephanie L. Willis. I am a policy strategist with the ACLU of Louisiana. I agree with my fellow colleagues here, and we all do understand that fentanyl is a huge problem across our state and across the nation. One thing that actually does trouble me is the fact that we are returning to the same policies, thinking that the same thing is going to work again. Longer sentences does not correlate with eradicating drugs or having individuals spend an increasingly longer period of time in prison is not going to solve our issue here with fentanyl. For example, on February 11, 2023, an Acadiana individual was arrested for possession with intent to distribute heroin. On November the 25th, 2022, a man was convicted of trafficking heroin. On October the 4th, 2022, an arrests were made for drug trafficking organizations based out of East Baton Rouge for illegal drugs, which included heroin. August the 24th, 2022, a major heroin dealer was arrested in Covington. This shows that we have not eradicated the problem. We still have a continuing issue. And if we continue to follow the same pattern, the same policies that we've made in the past, we see that it's not working. And so I've come here to the table today simply to demonstrate that, yes, there is a problem, but we need to return to evidence-based practices that actually work in our communities. And I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Bruce Riley. I'm with VOTE. And first, I want to say that I, too, like the previous speakers, think that fentanyl is a scourge that is really destroying our community. I've lost people from fentanyl, and one of my closest friends, Josh, died from fentanyl. And he was actually the one that told me about the existence of fentanyl because he had an addiction issue, which, like a lot of people, their addiction issues start with things like prescription drugs. And, you know, as everyone knows, the opioid crisis and the Sackler family and this pushing of the painkillers led a lot of people into illicit painkillers, and this is where we've ended up. And so, you know, this is not targeting that level of pushing or that place where a lot of this stuff begins. But I did do a little bit of math, too. So, like, the average OxyContin pill weighs 135 milligrams and has various amounts of dosage in the same weight pill. That would be about 207 pills would add up to 28 grams. So for people that have pills, as Ms. Garvey was pointing out, you know, the weight of the carrier ends up getting calculated in these situations. And I remember this was a very big problem around LSD, where if you had it in a vial and it was just pure liquid, it would be, you know, this much LSD. If you had it on paper or if you had it on sugar cubes, they were weighing the carrier and not just the drug. And so the problem with this is, you know, 28 grams of marijuana, if it tests a little bit of fentanyl on it, which apparently is very common, you know, that's like $150, $200 worth of marijuana. And so this is a life sentence type situation for what could be, you know, we're asking to change the age now. It could be a 17-year-old kid with 28 grams of marijuana and getting a life without parole sentence. As the ACLU was pointing out, you know, punishment has never reduced the need for drugs amongst our people that have, you know, something that they're trying to fill, a bottomless pit in their body, which is addiction. It's a supply and demand issue. I know a lot of you people are very into business and all that, and, you know, you can't eliminate supply and think the demand goes away. Right? People are going to get their drugs one way or another, and fentanyl maybe just happens to be an easy thing for people to be getting right now, and that's part of the problem. But if someone brings a big, giant amount from China or Mexico, as the news stories are saying, that's going to be a federal case. It's probably not going to be dealt with in our courts. And those people are probably going to be facing federal sentences and something that's close to a life without parole. And back when people were getting killed with a death sentence by the feds, that didn't change supply and demand either. It was 2001 when this body changed the life without parole on heroin to 50-year maximum. That did not change supply and demand. All that did was make people have a different supplier at times. It wasn't a huge thing. And finally, I'll just say that I would love for this conversation to be in the Health and Welfare Committee. And I wonder how many people here filed a bill in that committee which would actually go about working with doctors and community health workers and public health officials to really deal with the demand, deal with the issue that's happening, the problems in our communities and our families, because that's where we can actually end the drug addiction crisis. It's not going to happen through our prisons.
My name's Tanner Jenkins. I'm the commander of the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office Narcotics Division. I've worked in narcotics roughly 15 years in East Baton Rouge.
Just one simple question for you. In your experience, how often have you found fentanyl-laced marijuana?
Zero. And to my knowledge,
how often?
Zero.
So you have no cases in East Baton Rouge Parish of fentanyl-laced marijuana?
That's correct. And the last time I checked with the Louisiana State Crime Lab, which was about 3 weeks ago, they had 0 reported cases of marijuana with laced fentanyl in the state of Louisiana.
We just decriminalized fentanyl test strips last year, okay? So fentanyl test strips, if you want to have them, you can readily have them on your possession. It's not drug paraphernalia. I don't have any sympathy for drug dealers and drug manufacturers. If you don't know what you're selling, get a test strip and test it. And if you're not willing to do that, face the consequences. And with that, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we have a couple of questions lined up now for you. We have Representative Muscarello and then Marcel.
Well, I just want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under that hypothetical earlier that I think Meg said about 28 grams of marijuana, and there's a little bit of fentanyl in it, is it your intent that they be given life in prison for that?
So my intent is that we trust not only our law enforcement or district attorneys to make that evaluation when they're bringing a bill of information, and that they're going to make the correct, that they're not going to overcharge somebody if they don't think they can prove it. What I would tell you is that, like we just heard, I think we're using an extreme example. So it's easy to jump to these extremes. We've talked about how high 28 grams is, okay, from a fentanyl standpoint. It's very easy to go to the example of, well, what if I just had 28 grams of marijuana and there's a tiny little bit of fentanyl in it? What we're seeing is that, because we just heard testimony, that that's not a realistic thing that's currently occurring.
But Chairman,
I would tell you, no, the original intent was no, certainly not for that extreme.
Okay, because you're a defense attorney, I'm a defense attorney. I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying I want to keep fentanyl on the streets, but we see crazy hypotheticals in our business. And so that hypothetical could occur. I mean, you would admit that somebody could have 28 grams of marijuana with a little bit of fentanyl.
It's possible, but I think that's why we have the justice system. You know, I mean, it is. I think when district attorneys overbill at times, they're challenged on those aspects. And I mean, you're either gonna tailor a bill with every little hypothetical in it, or we allow the court system to do what it does and create case law in those cases and allow those challenges to be made in court where it's appropriate. I think the vast majority of what this bill will catch are not these minor type of offenses, but create a chilling effect, which will hopefully run this stuff out of our state. And that, at the end of the day, is the goal. The goal is to go to the days where we had severe penalties of heroin and we didn't have a heroin problem.
I have issues with giving anybody life sentences for this, and I think you've heard from some of the people that a 17-year-old could actually, or 18-year-old, or 20-year-old person could actually be in possession of fentanyl. And I was surprised when the gentleman came up and said that there's fentanyl, marijuana laced in fentanyl problem in East Baton Rouge, because quite the contrary, I've known several people who died from it. So I'm not sure of where that information is coming from. I wish Hilla Moore was here, my DA, so we could address that. But there are several people that I know that died from fentanyl because it was laced in marijuana. So the unintended consequences, and I heard what you said, that maybe a young person with 28 grams of marijuana and it's laced with fentanyl, would you be willing to address that? Because everybody doesn't have test strips. I mean, you know, we're not passing them out to folks saying, here's some free test strips. So would you be willing to, I believe that you all should marry these two bills together.
And I'll say that I'll take this opportunity to say I'm a co-author on Representative Villio's bill. I'm in 100% support of it. And I think her expertise and the research she's done on this and the testimony you hear, I'm in full support. We just have different approaches. I think we need to we need to bring the hammer down and try to run this stuff out. That's my intent. But to go on to where I think you were going, Representative Marcel, of course, you know, I'm more than happy to try to, I'm not going to make any promises that I'm going to change the language,
right,
but I am more than happy to sit and see if we can't tighten it up to alleviate some of your concerns. And I think, you know, with working with me over these past years, I'm going to spend the time to do that with you.
Yes, sir. I'd like to see you sit with Representative Villio and work this out so that we could get something that, again, Muscarello said it wouldn't be going to Court of Appeals and those things. And so we have, and I heard you say the justice system, let the justice system work. You know, if you said most of these, in most cases, you're going to catch the people with the 28 grams. What about the ones that's not most, though? See, because it doesn't take but a few of them to get out that unintended consequences. They did not know that there was 28 grams. And I guess what your suggestion is, let's let the DAs make that call. And what I'm saying, if we put it in the law and give them some opportunity. I think a lot of times we tie the DAs and the judges' hands when we mandate stuff, right? So give them the opportunity, a judge, to make that sentence, which is what Villio's bill does. So they can look at it and say, well, this is a kid that didn't know, just was on fentanyl and started giving it to his friends, and it got out of control. Somebody died.
Then they wouldn't have to bill them like that. They could bill them with a number of different, they could bill them less than 28 grams. They could bill them
I don't.
attempted distribution of there's a million different things you
But
could
they
do.
could,
if that's what
but you know people that don't have the proper representation, and there's a lot of them in Louisiana, then they'll have to plead. And I don't know if anybody is thinking about that, because they don't have we don't have enough money in our public defender system. This bill, I believe, creates a whole nother problem for our public defense that no one has said anything about, because they have to be defended. And so we already don't have enough money in that budget to defend people.
You know, the part of it that's the most concerning to me, which I can not going to offer any amendments or anything today, but is that in the law it says that fentanyl or a mixture containing a detectable amount in the aggregate weight of over 28 grams. A detectable amount in an aggregate weight sounds like it can be, and that's the language I want to talk to you about between here and the floor, because if the intent is to go after the dealer, the importer, the person manufacturing it, this is going to cast a way bigger net than that if it's only a detectable amount. But that's
no, and I understand. I'm not immune to that line of thought, and happy to continue to discuss that with you.
So if you want to close, you can close.
I think we've said enough.
Representative Horton, I believe, has moved to report this bill favorable. It has not been amended. Is there any objection to reporting House Bill 90 favorable? I will object to the bill being reported favorable. Okay, so we're going to ask for a roll call vote.
So Representative Bakla? Yes. Representative Bryant? Representative Edmonston? Representative Fontenot? Yes. Representative Garofalo? Yes. Representative Gudo? Yes. Representative Hodges? Yes. Representative Horton? Yes. Representative Knox? Yes. Representative LaFleur? Yes. Representative Marcel? Yes. Representative Muscarello? Yes. Representative Seabaugh? Yes. Representative Villio? Yes. Representative Marino? No. 12 yeas, 1 nay.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
When you're ready, Representative Villio, on House Bill 75.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. I'm pleased to be before the committee today with our House Speaker, Clay Schnecksnyder, presenting to you House Bill 75, which is a Sheriff's Association criminal package bill. Certainly, Chairman Stefanski has led into the horrific problem we're facing with fentanyl. Fentanyl is involved in more deaths of Americans under 50 than any other cause of death. The DEA administrator has said it is the single deadliest drug threat our nation has ever encountered. It is 50 times more potent than heroin. This is our most urgent public health crisis. As Representative Bacala mentioned, I think he mentioned a seizure by local law enforcement of 19 pounds of fentanyl. To put that in perspective, as he said, it's enough to kill a fully packed Tiger Stadium. I'll give you another example. Last week, 776 pounds of fentanyl was seized. It was hidden in green beans. 776 pounds, if seized in Louisiana, is enough to kill the entire Louisiana population. So what this bill does, what I've done, and some of the reps have noted it already, it is a tiered approach to sentencing, and for 28 grams or less, it gives a sentence range of 5 to 40 years, the 5 being a mandatory minimum without benefits. Then I take the 28 grams to 250 grams and give a sentence of 10 to 40 years, the 10 being a mandatory minimum without benefits, and then 250 or more grams is 10 to 30 to 40 years, and again, 10 being without benefits. It also has a tiered approach for number of convictions. On the first conviction, it has one penalty, second another, and then a third conviction for distribution would be 99 years without benefits. And again, we're talking about, we are targeting manufacturers and distributors. This is not a question of a user in this case.
I'm Sid Gotro. I'm the sheriff here in East Baton Rouge Parish. I've spent the last 48 years of my life in law enforcement serving the citizens of this parish, the last 42 of which I was in elected office as chief of police in Baker and now as sheriff. I can tell you in all those years in law enforcement, this is the most serious drug we've ever faced as far as killing our young people. This is 1 gram of fentanyl. That can kill 10 people. Now, let's take it on down lower. This amount right here is 1/10 of a gram. That's a lethal dose for any of us. If that would have been fentanyl, I would be on this ground in front of you right now dying. And unless somebody within the immediate area here could respond to me with Narcan, I wouldn't make it out of this building. And I'm going to end with this. I'm not concerned with the drug dealer getting 20, 30, 40 years of life. I'm concerned with the people and the young people that are dying in our community every day. Every day. I'm concerned about the families of those young people who are in the ground today. And as it's been stated, this is happening every day. I've instructed my people and my deputies, we don't go after users. That's not where the problem is. We don't go after the users. Users don't need to be in jail.
We have a question.
Okay.
For you. Representative Marcel.
Thank you, Sheriff, for being here. We all agree that we have to do something. However, you mentioned the doses. You didn't say anything about anyone dying where the marijuana was laced. Or maybe I missed it. Because I'm familiar with several people who have died in this parish.
We have not handled any cases, the sheriff's office here in East Baton Rouge Parish, with that occurring. But we know it happens. I don't know if...
it does happen?
I don't know if the coroners, if you got the coroners...
And the reason I mention it because of the small amount you held up. So if someone were to put that and lace that on marijuana, you would have the same effect, correct? You would still die, right?
Right.
Okay.
That's absolutely correct.
I just wanted to clear that up.
And I know you've lost people. I've lost people that's close to me. And we know firsthand the effects of this.
That's why I go out and volunteer and talk to the people and try to get them. So I did have some Narcan in case that was the wrong thing you took just now. In my purse. Let me know if you need it. I'll jump up. I got you. I appreciate that. I just want you to know I walk around with Narcan.
I did that, so I appreciate that.
I just wanted to add that I was just Googling free test strips, fentanyl test strips, and trying to figure out where someone might get them or even purchase them. And I couldn't really come up with an easy answer here in Louisiana. And so, I would just encourage you to try to get that out there into the community. I believe there's federal funding as well to provide those. Other states have programs where they're getting that out in there. And so I think that could save a lot of lives. Thank you.
We have a question, Representative Bryant.
LDH is working currently really hard about finding a vendor and getting test strips so that they can put them in readily available areas. And that is something that we are having a lot of groups, meetings and with different entities to see what places and spots these test strips could be located for any and everyone to have access to them.
Great.
So that is being addressed by the governor's administration. Yes.
Thank you. I think the thing that I want to speak to about this issue is that, we're here this year on fentanyl. Over the past few years, we've been talking about opioids. Before that, it was ecstasy. Before that, it was crack and cocaine. Before that, it was heroin. this issue of drug addiction keeps perpetuating itself. I don't know whether harsher sentencing is the solution or not, but we clearly are missing what's truly driving this. We talk about how we have one of the 2 or 3 highest incarceration rates in the country. We have one of the 2 or 3 highest crime rates in the country. We also have one of the 2 or 3 highest poverty rates in the country. Most people turn to drug addiction because they're living desperate lives. They feel like they have no way out, no hope, and the drugs fill that hole. So as we talk about harsher sentencing and how we're going to deal with this issue on a criminal justice level, I think we also need to be looking at how we're dealing with the underlying causes that keep perpetuating this. I was just reading a story that now there's a horse tranquilizer, so I mean there's just kind of a new thing every few years, and we kind of play whack-a-mole with it on the criminal justice side without actually looking at these underlying causes and why this keeps happening. And I would argue that that incarceration rate, crime rate, and poverty rate all being so high, those things are not separate issues. Those are intrinsically tied together. I believe Mr. Riley made a point about families and looking at public health as ways of trying to deal with this to keep us from having to play this whack-a-mole game over and over again. So I just would urge, if you're looking at harsher sentences and looking at this from the criminal justice side, please also look at how do we reduce poverty? How do we provide better public health? Thank you for the time. Happy to take any questions.
I guess so often I get taken back by sometimes you guys come up here and you often say, we need rehabilitative services. They need help. So I'm going to bring you back 3 years ago. I brought a bill that says when you call 911 for a drug overdose, not the first time, not the second time, not the third time, but on the 4th time law enforcement went there, you could be then subsequently charged. And the only thing that could possibly happen to you was that you would be sentenced to drug court and rehabilitation. 2 of you at that table opposed that bill. You opposed the bill. You opposed the bill.
I don't think I did, but if I did, and I think I remember the bill, it was 3 years ago, so I'm not 100% sure.
I'm telling you, you opposed the bill. You can't have it both ways. You can't come here and say you can't have harsher sentences, and then when we bring a bill about rehabilitation, you can't oppose that. You don't want anything.
I certainly didn't come to the table on that bill, and if I did oppose that, then I was mistaken.
So you okay now, after someone overdoses 4 times, that we try to give them rehab?
Again,
no, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Let's
again,
bring
and
that
if I
bill next year. Let's work together next year.
Absolutely.
We got people in the food parish. We saved 20 times. We Narcan them 20 times. And we still let them go back out there. We want to know why people's dying? Because people like you don't come with solutions. That's the problem.
I have actually brought several bills that I think would help deal with it.
Let's Representative Fentanyl, let's keep it, watch our comments. You mentioned our high incarceration rate and our high poverty rate. It's an opinion, but I think part of the contributing factors in our high incarceration rate is drug addiction. Part of the reason we have poverty that we can't seem to reduce is drug addiction. So, what causes what? And I do think drug addictions are factors that result in high incarceration rate in people who can't get themselves out of poverty. So where's the balance? And we talk about treatment. Treatment has been with us for decades. And we talk about treatment as the answer, but it hasn't proven to be the answer.
So that's why I put in a white card. I'm not here to argue for or against, and I would like to think that we kind of joke about how there's never a white card. I would like to think I'm actually doing white card testimony right now. As I mentioned, to your point about drug treatment and whether it works or not, I think it's a piece of the puzzle, right? All of these things are intertwined, and it is hard to separate what's the specific cause, the specific effect. That's why I think we need to look at it holistically.
What we're seeing in fentanyl users is the progression of a chronic disease that has gotten to that point, and they're using it because they can't stop, and they're using fentanyl because that's all they can get, and And I'll also say that treatment does work. There's plenty of data that shows not only does treatment work to save lives, but it works to save society money. The NIH says that for every dollar we spend on addiction treatment, we save $12 in social programs, and I think that's worth doing.
We've all heard of buyer beware. I would suggest that dealers adopt the slogan seller beware. If you're going to sell illegal drugs on our street, then you better beware of whether or not it has fentanyl. I assure you they know it has fentanyl because they're cutting other drugs and or substances for profit. But for those of you who are concerned somehow that they don't know, seller beware.
We have a motion already on the table. Representative Bakla has moved to report with amendments. Is there any objection to reporting House Bill 75 with amendments? Hearing none, the bill is reported with amendments.